Good morning. Welcome to the Streicker Center and to our Women on the Move Authors Series. My name is Marjorie Schuster. I'm the coordinator of literary events here at the Temple Emanu-El Streicker Center. We have a terrific author with us today. I'm very, very excited that Allison Pataki is here. She has written 9 historical fiction novels, one more interesting than the next, and you learn more every time you read them. Today, we will discuss her new book, The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Post. Zibby Owens is with us to moderate, and Zibby, of course, is an author, a podcaster, and now a publisher. Please write your questions in the chat feature of Zoom. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And now it is my great pleasure to welcome Allison and Zibby. Hi, Allison. Hi, Zibby.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How are
Zibby
you?
looks somewhere warm.
I am on vacation in Mexico right now, and it's 3 hours earlier, and I was like, oh my God, Streicker Center. Anyway, I'm here. It's all good.
nothing like crashing your vacation and
it's great.
Come on over here.
I wouldn't miss it. I'm outside. You can hear the ocean. Anyway.
Well, I'm going to leave you two to a wonderful conversation and enjoy. And thank you for being with us both.
Thanks, Marjorie.
Thank you.
I think Marjorie was getting worried that I wasn't going to show up, but anyway.
Oh my goodness, Zibby, thank you for doing this while you're on vacation. My goodness.
Allison, I adore you. I would do anything for you. So It's great. Okay, Marjorie Merriweather Post. This is so exciting. I know we've already talked about this once on my podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, but I am so excited so that everybody who's here at the Temple Emanu-El Streicker Center today, and welcome everybody, can hear about your fabulous book. And if you've read it, learn even more about it. So, Allison, for people who aren't as familiar, maybe they haven't read it yet, just do your thing where you tell everybody all about it, please.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. So, Zibby, wonderful to see you. And Marjorie, this is the book about the other Marjorie, the less famous Marjorie when we're talking about the Temple Emanu-El. She comes second to Marjorie Schuster. But my story is about Marjorie Merriweather Post, the great heiress of the General Foods empire. So if you've ever had a bowl of cereal, or if you've ever had a cup of orange juice in the winter, unless you're in Mexico. But if you own a refrigerator, let's just go with that. If you own a freezer, this is a woman who literally changed the American diet, the American way of life with the General Foods empire. She sort of shaped and reshaped the trajectory of life for all of us in the 20th century. But what she went on to do with this incredible wealth that she had from her family's business empire is even more stunning. So we have Marjorie Merriweather Post serving as the first woman United States ambassadress to the Soviet Union, right at the lead up to World War II. She was an incredible collector. She was an incredible philanthropist. She was a leader in the political world, in the business world, possibly the inspiration for F. Scott Fitzgerald in writing The Great Gatsby. She built the world's largest yacht where she had British royals traveling with her around the world. She just lived this incredible life and had this incredible mark on so many moments in history. And yet I think very few people are aware of just the breadth and scope of her legacy and just her life that really reads like the stuff of legend. So I had the great privilege of writing the first historical fiction novel about her. It came out exactly 1 month ago today. And today is her birthday, which is amazing because we're smack dab in the middle of Women's History Month. And Marjorie, planned everything, and she couldn't have planned it better than to have her birthday fall in the middle of a month that is dedicated to celebrating the voices and the legacies of these strong women. I would say she's up there as one of the iconic American strong leading ladies. And it was just such a privilege and a gift to be able to spend 6 years of my life researching her and writing her, and now talking about her with you and with readers.
Oh my gosh. Do you feel like there is a modern day equivalent? Like, who is the Marjorie Merriweather Post today?
I have wished so many times that she were alive today because I think we would all vote for her for president. Honestly, she came of age. She started in this time period where really it was Edwardian. It was like the Downton Abbey. She could never sit on the board of her family's company. You see her later in life sort of stepping into her power and emerging, with the self-confidence where she eventually makes history, sitting on the board for the first time ever for a woman to take a seat in this major corporation. But still, her story is sort of an evolving arc of the role of the woman in American society as well. And today, I think she'd be even more of a power player. I think you're probably the closest thing we have to her today. No, in the sense that, and this is how I have felt about you for a long time now, Marjorie just nothing was ever impossible for her. Like, she lived every single day of her life to the utmost, and just the amount that she was able to accomplish is staggering and exhausting and humbling. And I feel that way with you. There are very few people in the world that I feel that way. But yeah, no, I wish we had her, because I feel like if she were in charge, things would feel a lot less scary. Her father once joked about her, C.W. Post, the great food titan who went head to head with Kellogg, C.W. Post, the one who gave us Post food originally. He said, if you put Marjorie on a desert island, you could come back and a few hours later, she would have organized the grains of sand. That was just, she was a doer. She was a woman of action. And even though she had this incredible wealth and privilege, you always got the sense that she was at her happiest and most fulfilled when she was serving causes larger than herself, whether that is she funded the largest Red Cross hospital in wartime France during World War I. She was opening food kitchens and serving the poor of New York City during the Great Depression. During the World War II, she gave her yacht, this huge luxury super yacht, as we would call it, to the U.S. Navy for $1 a year, just so that it could serve, for the U.S. Navy. So she said, my wealth would have been a burden on my soul had I not used it to help others. And that was just the way she was. So we need people like her. We need, leaders like her. And her life, really, in spending this much time with her, has been an inspiration to me. I told you I want to get a bracelet that says, what would Marjorie do? Because I just feel like she really did everything she could to make the world a more beautiful place and to serve humanity.
So, Allison, I was so struck, like 6 years of your life. I mean, to dedicate, for anyone to dedicate that amount of time to anything says, I think, a lot, both about the subject, but also about the person choosing the subject. So why throw yourself into her life like this? Why dedicate this much of your life? You could have chosen anything. You could have spent 2 years and written a good book. Like, tell me about.
Yeah, it really says a lot about her. She's relative to some of the women I've written about who have been dead for 300 years, and there are huge holes in the historical record. Her life is relatively recent, and it's so well documented. Her final home, Hillwood in Washington, D.C., is now a museum that is dedicated to her legacy. And there are staffers of archivists and curators and PhDs who their work is every single day preserving her legacy. So there's a lot of information about her. And I also, with that, I felt this pressure to sort of honor her and also get it right, pass the credibility test, even though I'm writing historical fiction. I'm not writing a biography, but it had to be authentic and it had to have integrity and credibility. So it took me a long time. And it's not to say that I was working on this exclusively to the exclusion of everything else for 6 years. I had, at the time, I've had 3 babies. I had 1 baby when I started this. I now have 3. We had a pandemic. I put out some other books in between now and then, but I really just wanted to get the research right. I told my editor, when you're looking at Marjorie Merriweather Post's life, I could write 15 different books that could each go in a different direction. That could be a complete novel about Marjorie. There's just that much there. And so it was definitely the hardest book I've ever written. But 6 years ago was when I first just learned about her and first got the tip off. There was this mutual friend of the family who had been a historian at Hillwood, at her final home in DC. And she, at that time, 6 years ago, I had written 3 books about strong women from history. And this friend, Nancy Harris, had read my books and was a fan of the books. And so she said, would you ever consider Marjorie Merriweather Post for a subject? What do you know about her? And at the time, I really did not know anything about her, embarrassing to admit that. But I knew the name, and I thought maybe she was somehow connected with Emily Post and the Etiquette Manners books, or maybe a Post newspaper of some sort. And so she said, just go to Hillwood. Just go to Hillwood, dig into her life a little bit. There might be something there. You might be inspired by her for your next book. And so I just learned the early morsels of the 4 really dramatic marriages, about the food empire, and about her time in the Soviet Union and her time serving as the ambassadress, and then from that becoming one of the world's great collectors of Russian imperial treasure and art. And with just those morsels, I was just hooked. And I knew I had to look into her. And then 6 years later, here we are. I've done the research. I've done the book. I've written it. And now it's out in the world.
Oh my gosh. So next you can be an ambassadress. This is like taking your, oh my gosh, you're taking your, you can take your own marching orders. Can we diverge for 2 seconds, because you've been posting about your dad and your brother being in,
absolutely,
border near Ukraine and what they're doing. And for those who don't know, you come from a political family yourself. Can you just talk a little bit about the involvement? I mean, here we have Marjorie Merriweather Post like going abroad and helping, and like your family is literally doing the same thing, and you're posting about it as like, as much as you can do, right? So tell me about that.
It has been remarkable, sort of reflecting on that, because Marjorie was the ambassadress to the Soviet Union. She moved to Moscow at the start of World War II. And the directive from FDR was, as bad as the Russians might be at this time, because the United States had never recognized the Soviet Union yet. This was the first FDR recognized them and renormalized relations in the mid-1930s. Because he recognized, as bad as Stalin might be, Hitler would be worse. And if a World War II were to break out, it would be a disaster if Stalin and Hitler were aligned against the UK and ultimately America. And so, which is obviously what ended up happening. But so Marjorie goes there with orders to sort of befriend and normalize relations with the Soviet Union. And now I'm watching what's unfolding in the world, and just, when Marjorie was there, she was spied on, she was followed, she was living in Moscow in a police state with the KGB right outside her door. And now we're living through this, and so that's been a whole thing to think about. But then in our current day, yes, so people have said, what would Marjorie think? Because she was ambassadress to the Soviet Union, which at that time included Russia and the Ukraine. I know what Marjorie would think, because Marjorie would have stood up for what was right, and Marjorie would have been horrified by the catastrophe of Putin invading Ukraine. So what my family is doing is, we're from Eastern Hungary. Our village that the Patakis came from is near the border with Ukraine. And second to Poland, Hungary is seeing the largest influx of refugees. They're pouring across the border. And my family's ancestral village is one of the Red Cross bases, staging grounds for where the refugees are coming. So this feels very close to home. As it should for all of us, because what's happening now affects the entire world on so many geopolitical levels. But my father went with a humanitarian group. They raised a little over $500,000 in just the past week, and they went to the border with Ukraine. They got medical supplies, they got baby food, they have clothing, they have personnel, and they went, and then they crossed at the border near where my family's village is, and they went into Ukraine to deliver these supplies and to meet with refugees. And really, my father wanted to get a sense from what he can hear from the people on the ground there, the Ukrainians and the Hungarians, the frontline workers who are dealing with this in real time, and wanted to be able to come back and also advocate because of his relationship with the Hungarian government there. And so he just got back last night. He's already hankering to go back over there because he feels like it's just so needed. They need our help so much. And he said, it is remarkable the strength and the spirit that every single Ukrainian, mostly he saw women and children, because mostly these women had left their husbands and fathers and sons behind to fight. He said they are remarkable, but that it's not a sustainable situation, because right now, Hungary and Poland and all the European border countries, they're doing everything they can to welcome the refugees, but that as the crisis in Ukraine gets worse, as the Russian assault gets more and more hellacious, it's only going to deteriorate. And eventually, it's almost like right now what we're doing is we're doing just enough to help the Ukrainians hold on, to sort of maximize the damage and the slaughter. We're not doing enough to actually help them win, but we're doing enough to just let them hang in there, that their cities and people are going to keep getting destroyed. And so he said, this is really a pivotal moment, because they can hold out maybe 1 or 2 more weeks, and then the dam is going to burst, and the whole world is going to have a huge crisis. So this really, really matters. So I would just implore everyone who can, whether it's monetary aid, whether it's speaking to a church leader, a political leader, a community leader, sending aid directly to Europe, praying for peace, however you can. This impacts us all. And we all need to stand right now with Ukraine, because as Sean Penn said, who was there, he said, they are the tip of the spear. They're the tip of the spear, but this is coming to all of us. So, when there's a madman who's threatening nuclear war, everyone needs to take notice.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I feel like Marjorie would not have brought her tablecloths to this situation.
Marjorie would have loaded the Sea Cloud with hospital equipment and doctors, and she would have sent, everything she could. All of her firepower was to throw her tremendous wealth into, serving the cause. I have thought that on multiple occasions too. I think she'd have a Red Cross station at the border of Ukraine right now. And I think she'd be doing everything she could, for sure, because she always did.
Well, thank you for allowing me to deviate, because
it's on all our minds.
I feel like you have this insight that few people have with them on the ground, and it's just unbelievable. Horrifying. One of my grandfathers and his family came from Hungary, and then another one came from Ukraine, which I didn't even know because it was my great grandmother. So anyway, like everybody in the world, I am just watching and with horror. And even as you have 3 kids, I have 4 kids.
Yeah.
In history, when they would say women and children, but it's so different when you see these young moms holding kids in Paw Patrol pajamas, like
with one bag. Yeah.
I know. It's like, what are they doing? Like, here we are all in the United States complaining about the pandemic, where we're locked inside with like all the privileges of life. And anyway.
And also, we think as mothers with young kids, what kind of a world are we leaving to our kids? Our kids have the privilege as American babies to be blissfully innocent for now, but this affects all of us. And then, I'm thinking, because we're doing a drive through my church where we're sending baby clothes and baby formula and food, and I'm packing up my baby's clothing, and I'm just thinking, the experience that my baby's had in this onesie versus the experience that this baby who's going to wear this onesie in Ukraine is having. But for the grace of God, that's me. But for the grace of God, there go I.
Random.
They don't deserve this.
No.
So, yeah.
That would actually be interesting, like a short story about a onesie that, I don't know. There's something there. But anyway.
We are living history. We are living history.
So back to Marjorie and her amazing life and how it became a beautiful novel. There were 2 parts I found sort of equally interesting: the entrepreneurial side of her and the love affair side of her, right? These 2 coexisting narratives of innovation, and yet this, I wouldn't say failure, but the succession of relationships that she just couldn't seem to nail down, and how you can be so successful professionally and then feel like you have these personal failures at the same time, and how to reconcile that. So how do you think she came to terms with, and not to say failure, right? She did her best at her marriages and whatever, but how do you feel like she managed that, and how can anybody manage those 2 disparate halves of a life?
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, because as much privilege and luxury and opportunity as she had, she said, I had many beautiful things, but in love, I never had luck. And I really loved and admired about her that she was willing to keep an open heart and keep an open mind, and to just keep going, throwing herself headfirst into these love stories. And 4 marriages, every time we're like, this is the one, this is going to be her partner, her soulmate. She obviously felt that way too, where she wouldn't have, she was a smart woman. She wouldn't have entered into these marriages had she not thought that they were the one. And then every time, all 4 of them, you see these really dramatic endings, all 4 unique relationships, 4 very different men. You can trace how she gets, I think, from one to the other. It makes sense with Ed Close in the beginning, her young love and her innocence, why she falls in love with him. And then you see how that ends. And then E.F. Hutton, the second husband, was purported by all who really were in the know to be the great love of her life. And that was the couple. They were in the jazz age, in the roaring 20s, throwing these parties on the Gold Coast of Long Island. They built Mar-a-Lago together in Palm Beach. They were purported to be part of the inspiration for the Great Gatsby. That was a very, that was a great love affair for her. And then that ending is so devastating and heartbreaking, what happens there. And then she falls in love with Joseph Davies, who's the statesman, the dignified diplomat, sort of tall, dark, and handsome. And you can see why she's so attracted to him and their lifestyle. And then you see where that goes. And then the fourth husband, you think charming, bon vivant, artistic. Finally, this is a companion for her, built on this great friendship. They seem so simpatico. And then that is like this shocking, scandalous end. So it was a roller coaster. It humanized her for me in a way, because you see that she had heartbreak just like all of us, just like anyone, in spite of the great luxury of her life. And she was a very, I would say, she had this can-do attitude where, and I think it was partly her upbringing. I think it was partly what was instilled with her and her father. I think it was partly just being so aware that she was in the public eye, where she always looked on the bright side of things. So while she mourned these things in private, and, as the writer of historical fiction, I get to go there with her, sort of to the dark moments. In public, she always kind of held her head high. She would, finish this one devastating, scandalous divorce and show up looking fabulous in the public with photographers with a new man on her arm. So she never really opened up to the public about how she processed it, but I've heard from the family the E.F. Hutton heartbreak was the great heartbreak of her life. The third divorce was very acrimonious, very dark, and you see that in the book. She did divorce him for extreme mental cruelty. That's just a fact. The fourth divorce was very shocking and scandalous as well. So I would say, yes, she had these heartbreaks, and, technically on paper, yes, these 4 marriages were not success stories, but in the sum total, what gave me, heart and great encouragement was that hers was a life that was full of love. Even though the 4 romantic marriages did not succeed, you have the 3 daughters that were wonderful women, a bevy of grandchildren, amazing friends, and then look at all of the humanity that she served and loved. And so ultimately, her life was a beautiful, love-filled story with just these 4 very dramatic, juicy love stories that, had the endings that we see them having in the book.
And Marjorie also had a lot of loss in her life related to some of those marriages and had to overcome a lot that way.
Yes.
And just to bring this back to you, because you have overcome so much in your life as well. I don't know if the people watching today know about your amazing memoir, which is one of my favorites of all time, Beauty in the Broken Places, about what happened with your husband. So maybe you could, if you don't mind, just saying a few things about that and the act of how you have not only written so many, best-selling historical fiction, historical novels, but also a brilliant, beautiful, emotional, personal memoir, and your series of children's books. So you're, jack of all trades here. But if you could talk about that experience and maybe even where you come out on the other side of something like that, and how you just go about your daily business and pour a bowl of grape nuts or whatever after that.
Yeah. Thank you, Zibby. Yes. So when I was 30, my husband, who was also 30 at the time, my Yale sweetheart, we were expecting our first baby. We were on our way to our baby moon. We were on a flight to Hawaii. Dave was a doctor, an athlete, not a smoker, not a big drinker, just healthier than I was, annoyingly healthy. And he just turned to me in the middle of our flight. I'm 5 months pregnant, and asked me if his right eye looked weird. And I looked at his right eye, and the pupil was dilated. The black of his eye was taking up the entire eye. And it was just the one side, which was really scary and freaky looking. And I said, yeah, your right eye looks weird. And then just the asymmetry of it struck me. So I threw out the worst case scenario, because I'm a hypochondriac. And Dave, having worked in the ER in Chicago, where the show ER takes place, he'd seen it all. He was not a hypochondriac. So I was just like, are you having a stroke? And I expected him to be like, that's ridiculous. No. And he was like, I think I might be. And then a few seconds later, he just shut his eyes and went into a coma and was, what we did not know at the time, but what we figured, an hour later, we emergency land the plane in Fargo, North Dakota. We medevaced him to the nearest hospital. They were able to determine, yes, he was having a massive, improbable, possibly fatal, very unlikely stroke. And they said, you should tell his parents and your parents to get on a plane and get out here to say goodbye. They didn't know if he would survive the night. And so he did. He survived the night. He woke up from the coma several days later, but was in a state of complete amnesia and was just like a stranger, a different person. He woke up less functional than a newborn. So a newborn, can swallow and can drink, and can cry to express, a need. Dave could do none of those things. He was very, very sick. And so I wrote, not realizing it would be anything, but just writing sort of to survive and to cope and to process. I just began writing Dave a series of letters, just in the hopes, maybe if he ever gets to a place where he has the wherewithal to ask what happened or to have questions about this experience, I just didn't trust myself to remember all of this. And so sort of almost journaling, I just began writing letters throughout the entire experience to Dave and sort of for myself, and then maybe thinking someday I'll have a daughter that was being born, maybe, just for our family. I never intended it for it to be a bigger writing thing. Writing for me was, I wrote fiction. It was my joy. It was my happy place. Nothing about this was any of that. But as Dave made his remarkable recovery and we went through an excruciating, inspirational, intense year plus of rehab. And there was no case literature on how to rehab Dave. No one of his patient profile had ever survived a stroke like this. So they didn't know what to tell us. They didn't know what the prognosis was, what we could expect. We were sort of just making it up as we went. And the beauty of that was that nothing was off limits. We could keep pushing. Whatever goalpost they set for us, we could keep fighting to get there and to surpass it. And so as we just kept sort of defying expectations, as Dave kept fighting and recovering and sort of hitting milestone after milestone in the recovery, we got, to a good place. Our daughter was born, and, together as this new little family of three, we began to heal and sort of chart our new normal, our new life together. And so a year after the fact, my wonderful editor and my wonderful agent who had been with me through the whole thing, they approached me about maybe would you want to write something larger, for an audience. And I did not really want to be honest at first, but then I wrote a piece for the New York Times, and that experience was really kind of eye-opening because I had never written about myself in that way. I had just written about other people. I'd written novels. But then I was like, you know what? Every single night that I came home from the ICU, after 14-hour days, and Dave was still there, hooked up to life support, and I was alone, I would have needed a book like this. I could have used a book like this. I would have read a book like this. And I survived that moment in my life by reading a lot of memoir. And so I thought, if I can be a voice that A, shows people they're not alone, and B, shows people that if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, eventually you will get to a place, where you will walk and the road will be less scary and less painful. So I did it. I know you've had a similar experience too, where you've found the narrative through your pain and your healing and your growth. And then, I think as humans and as writers and as readers, we go through something and then the job is to sort of find the meaning or to find what did we learn? What are the stories we have to tell as a result of these wounds that have turned to scabs and then scars? What can we do with this resilience and this newfound depth of human experience that we've earned the hard way? And so that was what the process was. And writing the book actually was very healing and continues to be this cathartic experience because I connect with readers on all my books, obviously in different ways, but this is unique, because this is personal. I wrote it, as Lee Woodruff told me the night Dave had his stroke, I'm here as your friend, Lee told me, to welcome you to the club of the bad thing. And it's a club no one ever wants to join, but everyone joins it, and we all joined it at multiple times in our life. And so I wrote it really as a newly initiated member of the club of the bad thing. And so now I hear from people all the time about their entry into the club of the bad thing, and we connect in that way. And so it's, it's been powerful, and it continues to be powerful for all of us in our family.
That should be a book, by the way, The Club of the Bad Thing.
Yeah. Well, you know people, right? You know people who make books.
It'd actually be an interesting anthology, right? People sharing
I was
stories.
just thinking that if only I knew somebody who wrote anthologies.
Always like, that's a good title.
Yeah, right? Because in all your free time, Zibby, in all your free time.
Stop. How is Dave now? Did he, what is your life like?
I just heard him go outside to go pick up our daughter from nursery school. This was our second daughter who, in the darkest days of the stroke, I never would have thought, I didn't even think Dave would be able to participate as a parent with our first daughter, Lily. The thought of having two more kids would have blown my mind if you had told me that would be possible. But our second daughter was born shortly after, he made his great recovery, and her name is Grace, because it was a gift of grace that we have this family. And he just went to pick her up. He's great. He's working. He's loving life. He's the youngest of 6 boys, and now we have 3 girls, which is like a place I don't think he ever imagined himself being, but he's like the best girl dad. He's in love with being a girl dad. He took our dog running this morning. I always said recovery, because no one could really define what recovery would mean for him, because he's not like a 75-year-old man having a stroke who needs to recover in order to go back to his life as a retired 75-year-old. He was a 30-year-old who was trying to rehab to recover, to go back into the rush hour of life. And so that was a really high bar. And so I said, a full recovery for us is going to mean that he can live a life that is full. That is how we define it. And he is living a life that is full. So,
wow.
Thanks be to God.
Mm-hmm. You're amazing. You're so strong and just such a role model. I know we have a lot of questions coming soon, but before that, what is coming next? What is your next big project? Who have you been your claws into?
Yes. Okay, so I will be honest, this book came out exactly 1 month ago on February 15th. I have never been so exhausted. First, I will say, I have never had a book come out with this much interest, because she's so relevant and so recent, and it's so glamorous and inspiring, what she lived for. And then we rolled into Women's History Month, and there are so many just logical connections with this book. So I have been at a sprint for the past month, all day, every day, Marjorie. So what's next is I'm so in the throes of talking about Marjorie. It's really been all consuming, which has been wonderful. It's a great thing that there has been this much interest. When I come up for air and, the dust begins to settle. Also, my daughter turns 1 tomorrow. So my third child. So it's been a year. It's been a really, really busy year. So the next is, I really love the children's books. I really just love, it's like an ice cream sundae, writing a children's book and getting to read to children. And it's just light and fun and creative. You only have to do half the work, because the illustrator's telling half the story, which was a totally new experience for me. I was like, what do you mean I have to cut half my words? And they were like, the illustrator tells 50% of the story to the kids visually. So that was amazing. So I have all these children's book ideas that I would just love to do. And it's sort of where I'm living too, because my kids are 6, 3 and about to be 1. So I'm eating children's books all day, every day. It's our life, So my 6-year-old is now a reader, and then my 3-year-old is a book fiend. So I'd love to do that. And then I have my next woman for my historical fiction. I always put it to my husband. I know when I've settled on my subject because I get bitten. It's like it grips me and it doesn't get its claws out of me. And I'm just obsessed and I'm thinking about her. And so I need to do one research trip. I need to carve out some time this spring to take like a 48-hour solo mom trip to just get up nearby to do a deep dive and some research. And then I'm going to be able to share more. But it's like, I don't know if you feel this way, but when you have like the little idea and it's a little seedling so close to your heart, it feels almost vulnerable at first. Like I don't want to jinx anything, but I'm obsessed. I've run it by my literary agent. She's obsessed. So I think
so exciting.
I'm cautiously optimistic that, I'm always like, at what point does my idea actually become a book? Is it when I begin the research? Is it when I have 50,000 words? I don't, but I think this is going in the direction, like this is going to be my next book.
I think this counts. I think we can start.
Okay. We're putting it out there.
We'll put this as day one,
Yes. Okay.
Maybe people listening, if you have a guess as to who Allison has chosen or who you would like her to cover, put it in the chat.
I always need suggestions because it's always, the past few books have been tips from people. And I'd say like for every 20 tips, there's one that's like, ooh, that one, I need to really dig into that one.
Interesting. I love it. Okay. Well, let me go into some of these questions. Okay. Deborah asks, I loved this book. I'm wondering about Allison's choice to write this book in the first person. Was it to make it seem more like a memoir?
That is such a good question. This book came to me in the first person. I've never written in the first person. I think it was the plethora of information that was available. I had her journals, her letters, so many of her own direct quotes that there was just an immediacy to her story. It felt more urgent than these other characters who I've written about who have really been dead for so much longer. And they're sort of more obscured by the forward march of time. Whereas this, I started the research process for this by walking into her home, and it is still set up the way she left it. Dina Merrill, her third daughter, the beautiful movie star, said when Hillwood was set up as a museum after her mother had passed away, she said, when you walk in, you feel as though mother could come sit down to dinner. And if you've ever read the book yet and come to a scene where you're sitting down to dinner with Marjorie, that is high praise because Marjorie literally measured the table settings. Sitting down to dinner with Marjorie was an exact science. And so the fact that Dina Merrill said that about Hillwood just gives you a sense of how lovely it is, how they've preserved her legacy. Like you walk in, you look in her closet and you see her clothes. You see, oh, pink really was her favorite color. You see her bed, you see the art that's hanging. You really get a sense of her spirit. So I think, what's that?
I want you to organize a trip to Hillwood with you because I want to come where you tell everybody about everything. Can you do that?
I'm going at the end of April. I'm going. Okay. I have to tell you something funny about that. But anyway, so the first person, it came to me that way. That's really, I don't have a more thorough explanation other than just once I put all the history into my brain and I do my deep dive on the research and all the facts and the dates and the characters and the timeline are marinating, the story begins to just emerge for me. And I sort of I see the shape through the hunk of the marble almost, so to speak. And so that was how this emerged, was just, it came out in the first person voice. Hillwood. Okay. So I felt, as I said, this added pressure this time around because there are so many Marjorie Merriweather Post experts out there. And there are people alive who, when I'm writing about a scene, they were present in that scene, like her grandchildren, like her daughter, Dina Merrill, passed away while I was working on this book. So I've never had that experience with writing a book before. So I was really terrified of what her family would think because I'm not writing an official biography. This is not a Hillwood sanctioned project that is, a straight up, I'm writing a story. I'm writing a narrative that is inspired by her life. And so I was really nervous. And so I have had the amazing opportunity to connect with a lot of them through the experience. And I sent them the early copy of the book that I had. And so some of the family members came to my launch event in New York City a month ago. And one of the individuals who came was Dina Merrill's grandson, who is the family historian. He loves the family history. He has traced their ancestry back to Charlemagne. He is he's writing his own memoir about the family history. I have never been so nervous for a book event because I was like, on the one hand, I'm talking to readers. The book just came out, so none of them have read it before. So I'm catering it towards their experience. But then you have her family members who literally remember her and know her and loved her. So I'm sitting there. Susie Orman-Schnall was the moderator. She was amazing. At the end of the Q&A, the grandson asks for the microphone, and I'm sweating bullets. And he takes the microphone and he says, we read the book. We loved the book. It's, as you said, you did not have to embellish anything. Her life was truly that outsized and that dramatic. And we are so thankful that you have done her justice and that you're telling her story. Aww. And since then, we have connected and we've talked on the phone and we've emailed and I've met more of them and they have just been so incredible. So that has been an incredibly unique experience about this book. And to land the plane, my point here is I'm going to Hillwood, which her family runs, on the board as this nonprofit, and I'm going to be speaking there. And that will be a truly unique, really special experience, I think, as a moment to be able to go to her home and talk about her there.
While you were talking, somebody commented that I'm a docent at Hillwood. Somebody else has really been involved. So people are listening. Anyway, thank you for that.
Amazing. It's such a great place. It's such a special place.
Okay. Mitchell, I'm going to combine two questions. Mitchell asks, have you been to Mar-a-Lago? If so, how well is the interior preserved and the exterior? And other than Hillwood and Mar-a-Lago, do any of her other residences survive? And then to tag this on, Wendy's wondering, how do you think Marjorie would feel about Trump owning Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack in there. Okay. So Mar-a-Lago, I was researching this book really for my first draft. My first deadline for to submit the full finished book, had to hit send, was April of 2020. So I had just in time, I had just squeezed in. I had gotten clearance to go visit Mar-a-Lago for a research trip. At the time, obviously, Trump was president. So I went through the Secret Service clearance. I had spoken to the facility grounds manager there. I had made my appointment. It was March of 2020 and everything shut down. I was not able to get on a plane and fly to Florida, and the club closed anyway. So at that point, the publishing process is, 9 months ahead of publication, you have to submit. So all the edits, you backtrack from there. So I had to submit. So I did not make it to Mar-a-Lago for research. And so I didn't end up going at all. I was just there a few weeks ago in Palm Beach. I drove by, I saw it. I went to all of her, she lived for a few winters at the Everglades Club. So I was at the Everglades Club. I got to meet with a lot of people in Palm Beach who knew her and who remember her great square dances, who went to her parties at Mar-a-Lago. I was able to work with the Palm Beach Historical Society, but I did not, in fact, make it inside Mar-a-Lago. But the gift I had with this book was that photography existed when she was alive, which has never been the case for any of my subjects. I had to look at Jacques-Louis David portraits and be like, is that what things actually looked like? But this time I have photos of Mar-a-Lago and the interior and the dances and the parties. And so I did feel as though I had, research, I had footage to go on in terms of writing the scenes with my mind's eye. Her other properties, so Hillwood is a museum in Washington, D.C. Her yacht, the Sea Cloud, is a private yacht now that takes journeys, through the Mediterranean and through the Caribbean. So I have not made it onto the Sea Cloud, but it is on my bucket list to go on the Sea Cloud. And then her great camp in the Adirondacks in upstate New York was Camp Topridge. I did get to go there. And that was another file it away in one of the greatest moments of my life as a writer. So it's privately owned. Interestingly enough, when she passed away, she left it to New York State. And right up until my father's election as governor, it was the property of New York State, but Governor Mario Cuomo sold it right before, during his term. So now it's privately owned by a family called the Crows, and I reached out and they let me come visit. And they live there now. They spend summers up there. They've done an amazing job of making it their own family home while also really preserving her legacy. So they kept her cabin pretty much as she left it. And so when I went to visit, they let me stay in Marjorie's cabin. And you walk in, literally, you can see her hairs in the brush.
Oh my gosh.
There's a safe that they say they've never been able to unlock, which I've heard mixed reports from her family members, but that's what they say. And you see like the letters that her grandchildren wrote her that are still there. And so they let me sleep in the cabin. And as the sun went down, I literally felt like there had to be a security guard who was going to come and escort me out at some point, because it felt like I was in a museum, but I didn't sleep a wink. I was just so amped up and excited to be there. And then in the morning, when the sun is rising and you're up in the Adirondacks, you're in the middle of nowhere, there's barely cell service. It was a waterlocked camp in her day. You could only get there by boat. She loved it. That was like a very peaceful haven for her. After divorces, during world wars, this was very much a happy place for her. And so you hear the loons skimming on the water, the birds, and you see almost basically exactly what she would have seen, because it's so preserved and protected. And I got my coffee and I went out and I sat on the water and I just said this prayer of thanksgiving and for her life, and just this prayer of my earnest intention to be able to just do her story justice, and just something about being in that spot that meant so much to her. I really felt her spirit in a way. And I felt inspired. And so that was a really, really unique experience. And I will always treasure those memories and the photos and just the experience of being there. I'm very grateful I had that. And then the final question was, how would she feel about the Trump family being in her home?
Yes.
That's very well documented, actually. Her daughter, Dina Merrill, was one of the key figures involved in the sale to Donald Trump. And that Dina Merrill was a very gracious person. She did not have bad blood with people. But it is very well documented Donald Trump's attacks on her. So the family and the Post family and the Trump family are not on great terms.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I've not been inside.
Okay. Thank you for that. Vicky asks, any plans for TV or movie?
I would love that. Yes. So there has been some interest. And so we're now, it's this crazy experience where when this book comes out, and then, I mean, the film world from your husband, then there's this whole sort of like speed dating process where people who are interested come forward, and then you sort of see who's interested. But I see this as a great series, almost like the way The Crown is a trip through history through the eyes of a leading lady, a woman who was there and had fabulous, sets and costumes. This is almost like, I see it like an American version of The Crown, because she had an active hand in all of the moments that we learn about in history in the 20th century. And yet I don't really think people understand just the extent of her role in these moments. I say she's sort of like a Forrest Gump of the 20th century, in that she was front row watching and shaping history, but just with way better clothing and way better houses. So I would love it. And I think it would be a great role for a woman, because she had this just charisma and strength and dynamism.
You have a leading lady wish list?
Well, I love Lily James. I love Blake Lively. I love Margot Robbie. I love Rachel McAdams, Jessica Chastain. I think there could be any number of great, this would be a great role. So also people can put suggestions.
I love the idea of Blake Lively coming out of her, domestic bliss to star in this.
Right. Right.
I'm like, obsessed with her. Okay. So many things. Let's see. Anna would like to know your writing style. Do you sit down to write every day, longhand, computer? What's your method?
If given my druthers, I would love to sit down and write all day, every day. Life makes that hard sometimes, but I try to sit down and write every day. I'm a morning person, so while the coffee is still flowing through my veins, I try to do it then. And I write on my computer, old school, Word document. I write in drafts. I am not one of those people that gets it perfect before I move on to the next sentence. For me, it's very much the first draft is me telling myself the story and trying to figure out where this story is going. And then the second draft and the third draft are more fine tuning to figure out that I'm telling the story for the reader and creating for them the experience that I'm going for. So I write in a lot of drafts, and it's almost like the first round. I sort of think of it as like I'm holding a candle, and I don't see where I'm going until I take each individual step. It lights one step, and then I lights the next step, and so I'm sort of just figuring it out as I go, and then going back and just editing to make it like look pretty versus what the first round looks like.
Amazing. Well, I just want to read this comment from Linda. She said, I was a tour guide at Hillwood in the late 70s, early 80s. I met Dean and Errol and participated in a huge Christmas party at Hillwood with many of the people who had been at Hillwood when Marjorie Merriweather Post lived there. We were also treated to a tour through the basement where a stash of fantastic porcelain lives. I had the pleasure of a tour through Mar-a-Lago when it was still owned by the U.S. government and was escorted through the house by the people who had worked for Marjorie. A fantastic opportunity.
Oh, those are... Yeah. Incredible experiences. So when she mentioned the imperial porcelain, what I just love about Marjorie and what I feel is such a good sort of encapsulation of the many facets of Marjorie. She had Catherine the Great's imperial porcelain, the most powerful woman in the world, the Empress of Russia. And what did she eat off the porcelain? She ate grape nuts. She ate grape nuts every morning when she had breakfast in bed. And that just to me signals Marjorie incredible elegance and luxury and experiences and opportunity, but also always just this down-to-earth, salty gal from the Midwest who remembers her humble roots, that she came from nothing, that she started out by gluing the labels on the cereal boxes with her father in her father's barn in Michigan. And she always sort of kept it real always. And she treated people with such dignity, whether you were a starving mother in Hell's Kitchen, coming to her food kitchen that she was serving, or whether you were the King of England, who she was also friends with. She had this decency and this wonderful heart that I really loved and admired.
Another question is, has the Kellogg family responded to this novel?
No, not that I know of. I haven't heard. I've heard from many Post descendants. I have not heard from the Kellogg's, but that's a really interesting part of the story because C.W. Post started his food empire after having been a patient of Dr. Harvey Kellogg at the sanitarium. And C.W. Post said, hey, Dr. Kellogg, this cereal stuff that you serve to your patients at the San, this could be big. You might want to take this on the road and sell this to Americans. I think Americans would like this concept of a ready-made, convenient, healthy breakfast. And as the Post's version of the story says, is that the Kellogg's wanted no part of mass marketing and selling cereal to the American public. They didn't think that idea had legs. And so C.W. Post took the idea, ran with it, and created this entirely new breakfast and food industry. And then the Kellogg's jumped in and said, oh, wow, this is a good idea. We should really, jump on the bandwagon. And so the Kellogg's always saw C.W. Post as sort of this imposter interloper who'd stolen their idea. And the Posts always saw the Kellogg's as like, well, you weren't actually going to do anything with it. And it was withering on the vine. And C.W. Post didn't steal anything. He made it, he brought it, to the public. And so that's a big part of the story here behind sort of the food empire. That was really interesting. And Kellogg and Post are these fascinating characters from American history. And I had actually taken a class at Yale about them, and I had always really interesting. Yeah, it was so. And my dad at the time was like, "Why are you taking this gut on American food and diets?" And I'm like, "Look, I wrote a book on it, so it ended up paying off."
By the way, some suggestions for your next book: Evita Peron, Golda Meir, and Juliette Lowe.
Oh,
so just store those away.
Wow.
Let's see what else. Somebody is interested if you're related to Governor George Pataki, but yes.
Yes, he's my dad.
Other votes for the incredible title of The Club of Bad Things.
Oh, so, okay. So we need to just find an editor who does anthologies.
Yeah, or maybe it shouldn't be an anthology. Maybe it should be, I don't know. Okay, last question. Were you able to visit C.W. Post College?
So I haven't been to C.W. Post College, but I'm going there this spring. And I think I'm going to do an event out at a bookstore near there. And I spoke to people who went there and so the Posts had so many homes. So CW Post College was one of their Long Island estates near Brookville, Long Island. And so I was not able to go there, but I've been out to the area of Long Island where they lived.
One more suggestion is Glenn Close as an older Marjorie.
So this is crazy. I don't think whoever wrote that might not know, but Marjorie Merriweather Post's first husband was Ed Close. You can read about it in the book. They get divorced. Ed Close remarries. His granddaughter is Glenn Close. So Glenn Close, Marjorie's step-granddaughter. And I have heard that Glenn Close and Dina Merrill were actually really friendly because they weren't related by blood, but they were in the same extended family through marriage. And they call her Cousin Glenny. The Posts call her Cousin Glenny, Glenn Close, because they all stayed close. And this is really a really crazy thing. I'm going to blow your mind here. My mom told me this after the fact. I'm related to Glenn Close. I didn't know that. My mom neglected to tell me that. So my mother is like a distant cousin of Glenn Close. My mom's great aunt was sisters with Glenn Close's grandmother. So it's just crazy.
You're totally cousins.
So my mom has memories when she was a girl living in Paris of Glenn Close's grandmother, Hester Close. Close was her last name. Hyde. Visiting her and staying with her. And she was like, yeah, she had Glenn Close's exact face. And if you look, like when I was at Camp Topridge staying in Marjorie's bedroom, her two older daughters with Ed Close are Adelaide Close and Eleanor Close. They're Ed Close's daughters. So they were Glenn Close's great aunts. They had the same face as Glenn Close. Just the family genetics are strong, for sure.
That is amazing. Well, Thank you to who said that. Laura Beth, thank you for that brilliant suggestion.
I love it. And I saw Meryl Streep, too, was a suggestion.
Yes, Meryl Streep as an older Marjorie. She's perfect for every woman she plays, of course.
Yes, Meryl Streep is perfect for any role.
Yes. And speaking of Marjorie, does our Marjorie want to come back on? I know she's the...
Oh, yeah.
Says goodbye.
Got the beautiful photo there.
I am right here.
Marjorie Schuster is in the land of Marjorie Merriweather Post right now near Mar-a-Lago.
Oh.
I am. I'm pretty close to it, and right by Palm Beach right now. I would like to be in this miniseries or movie as well because I do have the name. So just keep that in mind. A small role, please.
It works.
Okay, thank you. By the way, somebody said Juliette Lowe. That would actually be quite interesting because I don't think there's a lot on her.
I keep a little document in my phone, so I just got to write these names in of like potential ideas marinating in my head.
Well, I don't know if you've been able to look at the chat, but everybody says such an interesting discussion and they learn so much, and every comment was just so positive. And you speak so beautifully, both of you, and it was so fascinating. And it's a thrill every week. Every week this gets better and more interesting. And I feel we all learn so much, and it's just been wonderful. So thank you both very, very much. I always like to plug the following week, which is Rachel Barenbaum, and that is called Atomic Anna. That's the name of that book, which now has become very timely. It's about Chernobyl and somebody going back in time to prevent the Chernobyl disaster, which I think will be an interesting discussion as well. So, Zibby, please enjoy your vacation in Mexico. I am finishing off my little vacation here in Palm Beach. And Allison, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And terrific. We'll see everybody next week, I hope. Thank you.